Good afternoon, everybody. I have gotten from Stuart that we have people from all around the world. I myself, I'm based in Dubai, so it's the start of the evening right here. But it's a great pleasure for me to be here with you guys and to talk about one of my favorite subjects, closing the gap between strategy and execution. And as Stuart was mentioned, last time I gave a keynote on this subject, it was in the largest project management conference this side of the Atlantic Ocean in Saudi Arabia last June. And I was really extremely surprised by the reception, to be honest. And I've had a conversation with him right before going on stage. We talked about the imposter syndrome. And I could not understand why people were interested in listening to us, because those concepts that are laid out in my slides today, they are so simple. It's just common sense. But hey, here we are. It seems like closing that strategy to execution gap is really the holy grail for organizations in today's hyper-competitive world. So I'd like to start with a study. In 2019, the Harvard Business Review published a report in association with the Bright Light Initiative. It was called Testing Organizational Boundaries to Improve Strategy Execution. They've surveyed more than 1,600 executives worldwide, and they found out that only 1 out of 5 organizations achieved more than 80% of their strategic targets. I'm just going to let that sink a bit, because mind you, those numbers were pre-COVID in a world that was much, much less complex to navigate. And the bad news, nothing has changed since then. I mentioned earlier how simple those concepts were, and I was not exaggerating. Together, we're going to go through 3 simple steps that will help you and your organization to understand where you may be going wrong. Are you ready? First, we will need to understand the problem statement. I hear you asking, why is that important? Well, let me answer you with a quote. I love quotes. Abraham Lincoln once said, "Give me 6 hours to chop down a tree, and I will spend the first hour sharpening the axe." And if that parable is not explicit enough, let me quote Albert Einstein. If I were given 1 hour to save the planet, I would spend 59 minutes defining the problem and 1 minute resolving it. Do you see where I'm going with this? How often have you seen resources wasted in your organization trying to solve the wrong problem? I'm pretty sure everybody here today has 1 or more examples of that. So once you're reasonably sure that you've narrowed down your problem statement to something that is accurate or correct, you will, like most organizations, invoke project management. And project management is what? It's preparing the solution for the organization. But where most organizations struggle, it's in the 3rd and last concept we'll go through today. Preparing the organization for the solution with the help of the change management discipline. You see, project management and change management are 2 sides of the same coin. And the organizations that are the most successful at executing the strategy are the ones that master those 2 disciplines and perform them seamlessly together. So let's dig a little bit deeper into those 3 concepts, will you? We will look at the capability of our organization in relation to project management, to program management, and to portfolio management. But first, we will look at the capability of the organization in relation to strategic planning. This pyramid here on the left is what a standard strategic architecture looks like in most models. And in most organizations, this is where the journey of the strategy formulation starts. And I want you to look at that triangle here at the top of the pyramid. It will be labeled your mission statement, your vision, or your purpose. Semantics don't really matter. Every system, every individual, and every organization in the universe have that in common. They exist for a reason. Every subsequent layer in the pyramid is a manifestation of what I call a why-how relationship. You decompose or break down each layer by asking yourself how you will deliver the above layer. And similarly, you can justify each layer by asking yourself why it exists in relation to the above layer. That simple relation enables you to constantly check the validity of your formulated strategy. So as you can see, your questioning techniques, or more precisely, your ability to ask the right questions, will ensure that your definition of the problem statement is as close as possible to the truth. Another super powerful tool. Yes,
so Fred, just before you leave that, so one interesting thing here is, I'll do it in the form of a question. How often do you see that the leadership team at each level in that hierarchy actually know what the strategy is and can articulate it? And crucially, do they agree on what that strategy is across the whole organization?
Well, to be honest with you, I very rarely have seen a complete alignment from the top to the bottom of the pyramid, right? So mostly everybody will be aligned on what the mission statement, what the vision of the organization is, and what the strategic objectives are. But as soon as you start prompting those questions, the why, how, very few people in the organization will be able to articulate that relationship between the different layers. And that really is indicative of a huge challenge, I would say, in that when it comes to defining a portfolio of projects that will sustain that strategy, executives will be unable to really formulate that portfolio in a meaningful way.
And this is one of the big challenges, right? Is that, very often people will jump straight into what projects should we do? How should we do them? Are we going to be waterfall or agile? Are we going to do that, right? And they're asking the wrong questions, because if you haven't sharpened your axe, right? So you don't know what that, how that vision translates into the next layer down, and how the goals at that layer down translate to the next layer down. And if your leadership team at each level don't agree that, then it's really, really hard to formulate the right solution.
Absolutely, you're absolutely hitting the nail on the head there. And this is where you will see, most probably an existing portfolio of projects. Some of them may be loosely aligned to some strategic objectives, but mostly they have absolutely no relation. It's just that they are here. And, we've been working on that for the past 5 years, and we spend that many million pounds on those projects. We can't just kill them. So we just need to continue delivering them until they're completed, because we're like 85% or 9% complete. And the people who are working on the strategic alignment, so I'm talking about the PMO people mostly, they will be asked to arbitrarily or artificially hook those projects onto elements of the strategy to somehow justify them, which is absolutely the wrong
way around
idea, and the wrong approach there. I've had some fights in my previous organization with some executive sponsors, and they were like, we spent like $10 million on this project. Yeah, okay, fine, but what purpose does it serve? No, we don't really know, because the guy who initiated it left the company 3 years ago. Fine. Where's the project manager? Yeah, he left the organization 2 years ago. Okay, but so what do we do with it? Well, you know, we're 90% complete. We may as well just finish it.
There you go.
But what it means
So,
with a $10 million cost baseline, 10% to complete is $1 million. So you've wasted $9 million on something that is not aligned to your strategy, but you prefer to waste another 10 rather than saving 1 million by killing the project.
and this is why I'm just going to wave the flag for a minute. So this is what Transparent Choice does better probably than anyone else in the world, is this prioritization piece and the alignment piece. And you know, I see a couple of people on here from Dubai, which is where I spent the weekend. And I can't believe Fred and I were probably within about 10 kilometers of each other, and we didn't actually get a chance to meet up this weekend, which was very frustrating, but never mind. But we spent a couple of hours talking about how to do this right. And it's hard. It's hard to get this kind of alignment. But it's so hard that, you know, the PMI did some research and found that 20% of a typical portfolio is so badly aligned with the goals of the organization that it should be stopped. 20%. So, you know, coming back, Fred, to your $10 million baseline, that means $2 million of that is allocated on stuff that's not moving you forward. And it's worse than wasting 2 million, because you should have been spending that 2 million on something that drove a strong ROI, right? So maybe let's say it was a 3x ROI. You should have got 6 million instead of wasting 2 million. So it's a huge thing. It's a huge challenge. So if this is something, if you recognize that, come talk to me afterwards and we'll sort you out. But Fred, sorry, don't let me interrupt too much.
No,
carry on.
It's not an interruption. It's just adding more emphasis on my points. And where you're absolutely right is that I haven't seen a single organization, and I've been doing this for a very long time, I mean, probably 26 years now. I haven't seen any single organization in any industry, in any continent I've worked on, that is doing this right. And there is always, the reason is very simple, actually. It's always ego that is going in the way. Because there is one individual at some point in time who betted the organization's resources on a project. And for them to decide to kill this project means, oh, maybe it's an admission of failure. Maybe I was wrong in deciding this project should go ahead. But it's absolutely not true, because the relevance of a strategic portfolio of projects is extremely time-bound. And what is relevant to your organization today may not be relevant to your organization in a year's time. So you need to keep this agility. And I'm not big on agile project management for every type of project, but you need to keep this agility in acknowledging when the circumstances of your organization are changing, that maybe the build of your strategic portfolio needs also to be revised. And that may imply waste, that may imply some projects to be killed, or potentially just postponed to a later stage if they become relevant again. But overall, I would say it requires executive courage.
Yeah, and you know, I think this is all tied up. Blanca asked a question a few minutes ago, which is, how do you handle resistance from the team to adopt project management / PMO processes? And I think, you know, at the end of the day, you can give them whatever arguments you like, but fundamentally, it comes down to the fact that most executives don't care about your projects, right? They don't care about project methodologies and all that kind of good stuff. All they care about is, can I execute my business? Are you giving me the business results that get me there? And absolutely. I think what, you know, so if you want them to adopt PMO, if you want them to adopt project management, then you have to start here by understanding and working with the leadership team to join the dots between the vision at the top and how that vision gets executed through projects, right? And then project management and PMO is all about increasing the return and reducing the risk to make sure that you are able to execute your strategy effectively. It's not about executing projects. It's about executing strategy, which is, Frederic, if I can put words in your mouth, that's kind of why you named the talk the way you did, right?
Yeah, absolutely. You know, and if you look at the disciplines that are involved into that work, project management is about executing things right. But portfolio management is about executing the right things, but they're not mutually exclusive. Any organization that aims at being successful needs to be good at both the disciplines. You need to do the right projects the right way.
Exactly that. Exactly that. And yeah, that covers actually the question from a shop, which is about what happens when you get an urgent parachuted project. And the answer to that is, if you have a really good framework that to align projects with your strategy, then when that, very often these urgent parachuted projects, actually, they might be urgent, but they're not important. And so when you have a good framework for doing, for mapping out this triangle, right, then you can very quickly answer the question, where does this new project fit? Is it more important?
How good is it really?
How good is it really, right? Is it more important than the stuff that's already on the plate, or less? And if it's more important, then what are we going to take off the plate? And it's not your job as a PMO to make that decision. It's your job to help the leadership team understand the consequences. So yes, we can do this project. And the consequences of that is that we'll have to stop these 3 projects over here. Would you like to go ahead? Right?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And this is what, so portfolio management is all about that. Portfolio management is about starting, stopping, accelerating, or deferring projects. Because there are very limited organizations in the world that work with infinite resources. Almost every organization, if not all, will have a finite amount of resources they can expend on project work, which means that if you can execute 10 large projects within a year with the resources that you have, and you have an 11th project that comes in, that means 1 has to drop out, right? And it's very easy. In most organizations I've seen, it's whoever shouts the loudest, right? Because again, the PMO personnel will most likely not have the relevant authority to go at the right level of the organization and discuss about the real stuff. So they will just take one project out, the one where the stakeholders are the least, I would say, aggressive or assertive, where the right answer to that is really to take it to the boardroom and as you rightly mentioned, Stuart, explain what the consequences are. What we do in our world is we enable decision makers to make informed decisions. Nothing more, nothing less. We are not decision makers. In the PMO space, we are not decision makers.
Couldn't agree more. Beautifully put.
So yeah, at this stage, I just wanted to mention a second tool that I found extremely powerful in terms of understanding a problem statement and validating the problem statement. And some of you may already be familiar with that. It's called the 5 whys. So the 5 whys is a technique that has been created by a Japanese engineer called Taiichi Ohno. That guy was considered as the father of the Toyota production system. He inspired lean manufacturing in the US. He inspired Lean Six Sigma and the 7 wastes. And let me just give you one example of the questioning technique here, right? So on the production line, there is a robot that stops. Why did the robot stop? Well, the circuit overloaded and caused a fuse to blow. Now, if you remember what I said at the very beginning, we are here in the first stage that is validating the problem statement. So my problem statement, after asking the first question, is the circuit overloaded and caused the fuse to blow. But if you start defining a solution for this problem, how confident are you that you're actually addressing the right problem? So his concept is to ask a second time the question why, but why did the circuit overload? Well, there was insufficient lubrication on the bearings, so they locked up. Why was there insufficient lubrication on the bearings? The oil pump on the robot is not circulating sufficient oil. Why? Why did the pump not circulate sufficient oil? The pump intake was clogged with metal shavings. Why was the intake clogged with metal shavings? Because there was no filter on the pump. So you could go on, right? But after some point in devising his method, he defined that 5 layers of questioning was the adequate level to get to a reasonable root cause for a problem. So in that example, asking why 5 times in a sequence allowed us to get to the root cause of a problem being there was no filter on the pump. Of course, real-life examples in your own organization might be more complex, but conceptually, this is as close as you will get to your real problem statement. There is no filter on the pump. Now, had you stopped earlier in the process, you would have get a flawed version of the problem statement, leading you to implement the solution to the wrong problem. You may have improved the lubrication system, added liquid cooling to the circuit, or increased the pump capacity, where all you needed was a filter on the pump. So one of the biggest challenges that you will face in your organization, in addition to understanding really what the problem statement here is that typically the people who will work on formulating a winning strategy, that triangle on the left-hand side, they will usually work in isolation from the people who are experts at the execution, the PMO people on the right-hand side. And because these two categories of people don't usually work well together, the formulation and the execution may be extremely disconnected. We talked earlier about artificial links, and I'm pretty sure that everybody here in the room will have had examples of that. You have an existing portfolio of projects, you have a change in the strategy, you have to arbitrarily decide where to do those projects hook on the strategy. See, you have to understand that the skill sets involved in being a subject matter expert in formulating a strategy and being a subject matter expert in executing a strategy are extremely different. So unless those two categories of individual are in constant contact, they mentor and advise each other, they challenge and question each other, and they involve all the relevant resources to make sure the content of the strategy formulated is accurate and supports the purpose of the organization, you're really not off to a good start. So at this stage, I want to quote a second study that really marked my mind. In 2017, The Economist published a report titled "Closing the Gap, Designing and Delivering a Strategy That Works." In this study, they surveyed 500 senior executives from companies with annual revenues of more than $1 billion. 90% of the respondents admitted that they fail to reach all the strategic goals because they don't implement well. And 53% of them even agreed that inadequate delivery capability leaves them unnecessarily exposed to competitors. So what does that mean? That means that most companies struggle to bridge the gap between strategy and execution, but also most of them will blame it on the execution and try to fix their project management practice when this is not the real problem they're facing. in reality, most companies that are successful at implementing the strategies are the ones that are the most adept at transforming and adapt. And
Fred, if I can jump in just for a second. So
yes.
I just want to quote another couple of bits of research. So a couple of bits of academic research this time that looked at this link between performance and strategy execution, specifically alignment of alignment with strategy. And the performance of organizations in these studies was very strongly explained by the degree of alignment between the execution and the strategy, right? So I'm pushing it a little bit. I'm reading into it a little bit, but it almost feels like the execution, it's the link between strategy and execution that's more important than the actual strategy, right? It's linking the two together, because you can have the best strategy in the world. If you don't link it to execution, you're not going to get the results. If you have an okay strategy, but you execute it really well, you're going to get results.
You're going to get more results. Yeah, definitely.
Yep. So it's that link between the strategy and the execution that's absolutely critical that you were talking about there. So I just wanted to hammer that home, that this isn't something Frederic's made up, right? This is real. There's research that validates this stuff, independent academic research. So yeah, the stuff done by The Economist was sponsored by the PMI, which is great. That's pretty independent as well. So that's fairly reliable. So there's a bunch of research behind this that tells us that this isn't just a bunch of highly paid consultants trying to make more money, right? This is real. This is a real effect.
So yeah, and also, you know, I don't really have visibility at this stage on the chat and the questions that could be asked, but how many of you today have faced something similar to that? I mean, how many of you can relate to what we're talking about? You have a strategy that may be absolutely wonderfully formulated on the paper, but then the portfolio of project that executes it is absolutely not aligned to it. Or, you know, in my previous organization as well, I mean, some of the strategic objectives had literally 0 projects attached to them. I've faced in one of my past organizations, 82% of the organizational strategic objectives had 0 projects attached to them. 82%. That means 18% of the strategy is delivered through the portfolio of projects, and 82% is delivered through business as usual. I mean, it's not rocket science, but that does not make a lot of sense to me.
Agreed.
So
I'm just digging out some of the references, guys. I'll paste them into the chat. People are asking about the references, Fred. So I've got the PMI one that you used, and I'll dig out mine as well.
So yeah, you know, if you look at the semantics, transforming, adapting, the answer was right in front of my face, right? Change. And change management literally is the third pillar I wanted to talk about today. Every strategy imposes a change in some degree, and that change needs to be managed. So in 1909, a scientist called Van Gennep introduced a definition of change as the action of going from a current state to a future state while passing through a transition. Okay, so in our case, the organization before the strategy gets implemented, the organization after the new strategy is implementing, and that transition phase while you're actually implementing the new strategy. But this is where one of the biggest challenges of our era lies. And if you're already familiar with the subject of change management, you will know what I'm talking about. But for the others, this might be a revelation. Organizations do not change. People do. So what you may consider as a very simple change from a current state of the organization to a future state of the organization is in reality a collective of dozens, hundreds, thousands, maybe more individuals, each going from their own current state to their own future state, passing through their own transition. And when all of that change, all of that collection of individual changes is successfully managed, your organization will reach success. Unfortunately, this is not how things happen naturally, because individuals naturally resist to change, meaning that when you start implementing something new, you will start losing people on the way. And that will start minimizing your success. And in the absence of a proper change management process, you will lose so many people on the way that you will completely negate your success. And this is really what I mean by preparing the organization for the solution. You may have the perfect problem statement, your strategy, well formulated, well-defined. You may have a perfectly aligned portfolio of projects to deliver this strategy. You're preparing the solution for the organization. But at the end, you're not preparing the organization for the solution. You may saturate your people with unnecessary change. You may lose them through resistance and denial, and in that way completely annihilate your ability to deliver your strategy.
Now, as part of that, Fred, there's a couple of questions floating around in the chat.
Yeah.
We don't have time to do them all, but there's kind of a theme with a couple of them that's around how do you get executives to step up and do their job, right? So within a project, your exec sponsor, the owner, call them what they will, they're there to make decisions, to make sure you get resources to, and they're one of the key resources you have to do this change management, right? To drive it, because they have the power to convene and to set goals and all kinds of wonderful things. So how do you, how do you take not just the organization at the operational level, but how do you take your executives on this journey to really engage in this transformation and manage it?
Yeah, it's that's the $1 million question, Stuart. Unfortunately, the answer is different in every organization because it's very largely related to people. There are some commonalities that I've seen over the years, and one of those commonalities is that people don't care about change management. I literally, like 2 days ago, I had a conversation in my current organization with one of the vice presidents, and I was like, well, how do you manage change? Oh, you know, you have change control, we have impact assessments, we have this, we have that. No. How do you manage change? How do you manage the impact on people? How do you manage the adoption? Oh no, we don't care about that. And
this is related to what I don't know if anyone on the session knows Laura Barnard. Do you know Laura, Frederic?
Yeah, I remember Laura very well.
Yeah. Okay. So this is what Laura talks about as kind of the strategy execution gap, which is where, you know, lots of PMOs spend a lot of their time thinking about, you know, spend 80% of the time thinking about project management and project process and project execution. But actually the gap isn't at the project level. You've got project managers that can do that. The gap is at the portfolio level, and the change, kind of very closely related to change management, is benefit realization and execution. Absolutely. Of the benefit, right?
Yeah.
They're sort of the same. You can't separate those two. So this is, again, just I'm raising this not to take the wind out of Frederic's sail, but to kind of hammer home, this isn't just something Fred's made up. This is something that the people right at the top of the profession are hammering as hard as they can to try and get everybody to change the way we think about this stuff. Right? As PMO leaders, our job isn't to execute projects better. Our job is to do the portfolio stuff and to make sure that the mindset and the tools and the capabilities are there to allow people to manage that change. And change management, benefits realization, again, it's kind of the same. They're glued together, those two ideas. That's an area that PMOs can often add a lot of value because there is precisely because there's resistance, right? It needs someone to focus on it and figure out how to break that resistance. Yeah. So, answers on a postcard, please. Anyone who can answer the $1 million question.
Yeah, I mean, we're laughing at that, but this is really the $1 million question, and people who are adept at answering that question are actually much better positioned in our industry than others. But I would say that it is not something that is very natural, and you need to engage with the top layers of your management. I'm currently working very hard on my chief executive officer. I'm working very hard on my executive directors so that they understand that they are the change agents. And if they do not drive change management from the top down, there is very little that we can do from the bottom up. Right? So it's not that a framework that only works top down will deliver results, but it's this combination of the top down coming from the executives and the bottom up coming from tactical changes and PMO processes. But both of those need really to work in conjunction. So I actually do have a framework that I wanted to offer there. And some of you who are familiar with the change management may have heard of that. It's called the ADKAR model. So the ADKAR model has been developed by ProSci, which is one of the leading organizations in change management. And you start by preparing the approach, then you manage the change, and then you sustain the outcomes. And what I really like about the ADKAR model is that So the ADKAR model is an acronym. It stands for awareness, desire, knowledge, ability, and reinforcement. And this is really based on psychological studies on human beings. And those are the successive steps each and every human being will go through when facing a change. So the first question will be, Stuart, are you aware that this change is coming? There is no point starting to work on your ability to change if you're not aware about the change. The second stage after the awareness is built up is, Stuart, do you want to change? So once I have strategies that are put in place to raise your awareness, only then I can start working on your desire. In the desire phase, this is where we are removing resistance. Once we build your awareness and your desire, we're going to work on your ability, on your knowledge, and then your ability. The knowledge is the theoretical tools that are available to you to actually implement the change. They, in turn, become abilities. So how do you turn this theoretical knowledge into a physical ability to embed the change? And once the change is implemented, how do we reinforce it? How do I stop you from going back into your old ways and negate the benefit of the change? So it's theoretically very simple, right? Those are sequences of steps every single human being will go through. So in theory, it's simple to address. I would say the complexity lies in the fact that not everybody will go through them at the same pace and for the same amount of time, which means that depending on the complexity or the size of your organization, you will need a lot more effort in understanding who the people impacted are, how they break down into groups, how those groups will react to the change, and how you can actually push them forward through the ADKAR model, so that the ultimate objective of the ADKAR model is really to streamline the transition from the current phase to the future phase. And it's extremely difficult to put in place. So I would say really a word of caution. Change management is an extremely challenging implementation.
I would agree with that. So in the there's a bit of a debate going on in the chat, Fred. There's a bunch of people on one side and I'm on the other. So you get to be judge. So the prevailing wind is, how do you get execs to care? Change, because they don't care. They don't want to change. They're not interested in change. And I think that's too simplistic. I think what they're interested in is getting the results, and they're not getting the results they want today. And but they don't understand the link between their behaviors, the way the organization's set up, the way incentives are built. They don't understand how that's getting in the way of them getting results, right? So when they come in and they say, you need more templates and more process, right? That's because they don't know what works. And why should they? Because they're executives, they're not project professionals. Yes. So what do you think? Do you think they don't care, or do you think it's more that they just think that they don't appreciate what the route to success looks like?
No, I think, look, I think there is not a single individual that goes to work not caring or wanting to do a bad job. So as much as we may be, as project professionals, disgruntled with our executives, we have to give them that credit. They genuinely want to succeed. Otherwise, they would not be sitting where they sit, right? But I think they genuinely do not understand their own place in the problem statement. And because they have a preconceived visualization of the world, which is, you know what, my strategy is perfect. If we don't succeed in implementing it, it is because of the project management method. So I think it's more a matter of ego, and it's more a matter of refusing to acknowledge their own limitations. That really goes in the way. And unfortunately, unless you're an extremely skilled professional at those three concepts that I outlined, the problem statement, project management, and change management, you will struggle to describe how they should be addressing the problem. And there is no easy way for that. I would say the right way of approaching it is to really invite them to conversations with people of different backgrounds, of different industries, of different organizations, so that they do understand that it's not them. Every organization goes through the same challenges. But the way for those organizations to address those challenges is to accept that, there is more to it than what they believe there is. And really, yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, sorry, Fred. So one approach that I've seen work really well is to start the process. Again, this is a change management process like any other change management process.
Yeah.
And so you got to so a really good place to start is to engage your executive team in a conversation about, you know, what do they think is, what's causing pain for them, right? So is it the fact that we just don't know how many projects we're doing? Or is it the fact that, you know, nobody can get projects initiated, or we never finish projects, or they take too long, or they're always over budget, whatever it is. But try to understand what the biggest problem is for them. And then just focus on having a discussion about what's the root cause. Just pick one or two. Don't try and do them all. Don't try and fix everything, because you can't, right? But pick one thing that the execs, that's really bothering them. And then do the root cause analysis on that, yes. You know, the 5 whys. And then present that root cause analysis with a solution, right? So you say, great, we've done the root cause analysis. And actually projects aren't over budget because, or they're not being delivered late because we've got incompetent project managers. We did the 5 whys and we discovered that, you know, actually the root cause is that we have too many projects, and so the root cause of that is that we've got a weak prioritization process. Let's fix the prioritization process, right? And show, you know, get commitment around one thing, show success. And what that then does is it builds confidence in you as a leader. It builds confidence in you as someone that gets stuff done. It builds confidence in the PMO organization. And that lets you take the next step, right? To pick the next thing to fix. So I wouldn't try and fix everything. I would pick, you know, prioritize, pick 1 or 2 things that are bugging the execs, and just try and fix that. But go through, they're grown-ups, right? The leadership team are grown-ups. They're smart people. They're not idiots. I know it's like you said, it's fun to grumble, right?
Yes.
But they're not idiots. They're actually really, really smart people. And if you give them the information, if you give them that structure, and say, okay, guys, here are the options that we've got. What do you want to do to fix it? They will typically bite on that, right? But be really clear with them that you can't fix everything super quickly. We've got to go step by step, because we've got to carry the whole organization. And, you know, again, I've seen that work well many times. But it's, as Fred, as you said, it's not easy, right? It's not easy. But you have to start on that journey, because if you don't, it's the old story about, you know, 2 guys. I've taken over now. Look at this. 2 guys standing on the riverbank, and you know they see this guy floating down the river, going, "Help! Help! I'm drowning!" Right. So one of them jumps in the river, swims out, pulls him in, and looking at him, going, "Well, that's strange." And another one comes down, "Help, help." So the other guy jumps in, pulls him out. 2 more bodies come down, "Help, help." They swim out and pull him in. At which point, one of the guys on the bank runs off upstream. And you know, another body comes down, and the guy goes, "Help." Guy jumps in, pulls him out, pulls him out, pulls him out. Eventually, the one who ran upstream comes back. And you know, his friend says, "Where did you go? I was really busy pulling out bodies, and you left me, and I had to pull out all the bodies on my own. Where did you go?" He said, "Well, I went upstream and I managed to stop them throwing bodies in." Right? That's what we're trying to do. We're trying to go upstream and stop people throwing bodies into the river that you then have to rescue downstream. And the problem is, I think, in this industry, we sometimes get so busy trying to pull the bodies out of the river that we forget to send someone upstream to stop people throwing them in the river in the first place.
Yeah.
And you know,
you love that metaphor, because that's exactly it, you know. And unfortunately, when you have executives shouting at you and you're a PMO professional, and you have to do the reporting and everything, you will not allocate time to go upstream. You will just jump in the water, pull out the bodies, and try to extinguish the fire, the alert right now.
Exactly that. And the key thing is that you cannot, you know, it's a crazy thing, but you cannot execute yourself out of a situation that's impossible, right? So if your executives have given you twice as many projects as you can deliver, you can't execute your way out of that. Or if you've been given a project that's so complex that it should never have been taken on in the first place, you can't execute your way out of that, right? It's not a project management problem. That's a governance problem up front, right? It's a
problem
governance
is,
planning.
the more skilled you are at your job, the longer you can cope with the problem. So you will execute your way out of it a month, 3 months, 6 months. Ultimately, you will drown. But because you've coped so long with the problem, people will think it's a project management problem when it's not.
Exactly. So we've sort of got to the top of the hour somehow, Frederic. I don't know if we've done that.
I can't believe that.
I know. Do you have more slides, or shall we just see if anybody's got a couple of questions before we close?
Well, I just wanted to wrap it up.
Yeah,
I promised something when I started. I promised 3 things. I promised that we would look at strategy formulation. And really, if I can leave you with one golden nugget, guys, it's those 3 stages. Define the problem statement of your organization. Define the solution for the organization, and then prepare the organization for the solution. And before we move into the last stage, Stuart, of having an open conversation, I just wanted to thank everybody for their time and attendance and participation. And if you want to stay in touch and keep the conversation going, here on the slide, you have my LinkedIn profile and my email address. So thank you again, everybody.